And welcome back to another episode of the Hella Chisme Podcast. My name is Dana, and I'm your host. As you see, we got some lovely guests this episode. I'm very excited. Usually I would do an intro, then do the guest, but then this has been a long time coming with the story that I told on the last episode about how the files got lost or I deleted them on accident, and now we're here. But I would love to introduce Fadaka and Dee on the Hella Chisme Podcast. Welcome, welcome, y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much, Dana.
So let's do a little intro. Fadaka, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you're located, or whatever you want to share.
Okay, great. My name is Fadaka George. I am the founder and principal consultant for Fadaka Co, FDK Co, and consulting and events. We help people who have questions about culture and what does that mean for their identity? What does that mean for their business? Even what does that mean for their relationships? So that's where we are. And we love to do culturally informed events because we love to celebrate parts of our culture that look at the Bonito Bowl, perfect example
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
culturally informed event. It was awesome. So that's what we do over here at the FDK Co. And I am located in Tampa, Florida. Roll your eyes if you want to. That's okay. Everybody had their feelings. Um, but I am here in the Sunshine State.
Yes, thank you. And Dee.
Yes, yes. Thank you for having me. I'm always glad to be back. I always feel like my cheeks start hurting when I'm around you. Smiling so much. My name is Dea Sudie. I am the founder and chief consultant for Genuine Forest Freedom Practice. And really, what I do is I work with individuals, communities, organizations, and companies to consider what their practices are around embodied liberation and how we can address that through healing centered systems, practices, as well as collaboration. So I'm excited to be able to work with people, particularly in this time where freedom and liberation is being infringed upon. What
Mhm.
does it mean to radically claim ownership of ourselves in this space and in this time? So that is who I am. And currently, I am embarking on a self claimed sabbatical because they are wearing Black women out. Okay. And I've been
Mm.
for 3 years off minimum. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and take my year in alignment with Toni Morrison's year long celebration here in Ohio. So excited about that and keep up with me for updates.
Nice.
Nice, nice. And welcome, welcome to both of you. So, just to give y'all some background, I met Dee and Fadaka during a time where I was for sure unemployed. I was 100% unemployed. We did the DI boot camp, and I think we were in a working group together, right?
We were.
And then we kind of became, well, we did become each other's accountability partners, and
Mhm.
we uh continued to meet. It was like every other Wednesday or something,
Yeah. Hmm.
and we would do and kind of have conversations like we're having today, and also give each other feedback on projects that we're working on or contracts that we're trying to get. Um, and then it's just bloomed into a friendship over the last 3
Can you believe it's
years.
been 3 years?
Yes, yes,
It's
that
been
and
3 years.
and
It
so
feels
much
like
has
just
happened in
yesterday.
those 3 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so and that's how we've met. And so we've been able to, sustain a friendship. And I think one of the things that's important during the times when someone's going through hardship or going through change when it comes to career, is finding your people. And I will say that you two have been pretty solid in my life when it comes to creating a friendship, especially when not even living in the same state or area.
Yeah.
Um, so initially our goal was to have a conversation about African American and Afro American folks in different diasporas. That was the goal of the conversation. Yes, we still gonna touch on pieces of that, But since
Okay.
then, so much has happened.
It's a
So
lot.
much.
There's so much.
There's so much that has happened. So I am going to start with a little simple check-in. How are we doing, especially with it being Black History Month? We are celebrating 100 years of Black history. How we doing? How we feeling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dee, I want to hear your thoughts first because I know it's going to be poetic.
Sometimes I really don't have the words, but what's coming up for me, especially as I'm anchoring myself in this practice of claiming ownership of the self, as well as just exploring the various works of Toni Morrison. But there's this particular quote. And sometimes, for some people it's a quote, for some people it's a warning, it's a declaration, it's a reminder. But Toni Morrison reminds us that racism is a distraction, right? And she does a lot of work around decensoring the white gaze, particularly as we tell our stories. And I think, and I'll speak on behalf of the whole collective, right? So there's very, but I do think that we have seen in the last month, in the last 6 months, in the last year, in the last decade, so much that is coming to distract us from the brilliance that we are. And so you'll have a sitting president decide to insanely pose racist tropes and caricatures of Black people, of the first African-American president and his wife. You'll have different people say the quiet part out loud, whether we're being called DEI hires, or, sometimes they'll just come out and say the straight N word. I mean, Homegirl literally just lost a show because she slipped up and said the N word with a hard ER. And so I think that we're in a time where there is so much that is coming to distract us from who we are, whose we are, even down to the erasure in terms of dismantling legislation and or institutions and structures that have been put into place so that we can safely be everyday Black people, everyday excellence, everyday exceptionalities. And so I think there's a lot of distractions that are coming, and it's dope to see how it is that we are responding, not to the white supremacy, but more so to this is a distraction and we are not going to be pulled out and expend our labor and our energy addressing things that are just so blueprint white supremacy culture. And so it's been dope to see the ways in which we've reminded each other of who we are, as well as we've reminded the world of who we are, particularly in a space and a time where, white supremacy is buckling. And I think, and I use that word buckling intentionally because they are working very hard to hold on to a space that is unearned, right? And to hold on to power that is by time that we leverage in a way that is more equitable. So all of that to say, child, I have been drinking my water, okay? Business that pays me, and the business that pays me are brown and Black people, and how we are thriving or not thriving in this space. So it's also really called me into invitation of what kind of ancestor do I want to be in this time. And I'm just not about to be the ancestor that responds back to a white supremacist president in the way that he wants me to. I think there has been a blueprint of ways in which we resist things that come to dehumanize us. And as a love letter to the people, let's let it be okay that we all show up in various ways of resistance, right? We all don't have to show up one particular way. So my way has been rest. My way has been creating. My way has been literally getting up and walking away from a table that triggers me racially and letting them know I will not return until this can be handled. So yeah, it's been all encompassing over here. What about you, Fadaka?
I love it.
I really loved what you just shared, that resistance can look of like so many different ways. And for me, right now, I'm just filled with a lot of pride. I love the ways that people are taking care of themselves in the Black and Brown communities. I love the ways that people are not shrinking back from their ethnic and cultural identities. Of course, that's not all that makes up who we are, right? We are complex, layered individuals and communities. But I love just how people are celebrating who they are. I saw that in just even during the like I call it the Bonita Bowl because I wasn't watching football. I was watching Bad Bunny. How he brought, Afro Latinos to the front. Like he brought
Mm-hmm.
them to the front, Afro Hispanics, like he brought them to the front. And I was like, yes, that's beautiful. Let's celebrate that.
Mm-hmm.
For so long, they've not even been mentioned or they've been overlooked.
Yeah.
So I've been filled with a lot of pride. I've also been filled with a lot of like, I agree. It is a distraction in a lot of ways, but also knowing that it's a distraction has made me realize like, oh no, I'm still gonna go about my life. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
still gonna do me.
Mhm.
I'm still gonna speak up. I'm still gonna stand on like speak truth to power. I'm still gonna do those things and question and also just really pride in knowing our history. Like because
Mhm.
it's trying like you said, like it's trying to be erased right now and knowing that like
Mm-hmm.
no, like there's the real MLK, the radical MLK, not the whitified MLK. There's the, the real Frederick Douglass and the real Harriet Tubmans and Rosa Parks didn't just wake up one day and decide not to get up from that bus seat. There was a
Mm-hmm.
plan. Like there's so much rich history. I see it here in Tampa,
Yeah.
work being done to not have it be erased and forgotten.
Yeah.
Because Tampa wasn't desegregated until like I think the 1970s.
Wow.
We have not even reached 100 years over here. So like there's just so much history that I'm proud that is being brought to the forefront, even if it's not being made mainstream, but people are refusing to let it be forgotten. And that
Yeah.
fills me with pride.
Yeah. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
goosebumps. Goosebumps.
Um, and so the only thing I would add to that is just, for me, it is my everyday job in a space where that's predominantly white, and then mixed with it being super political. It's my job to make sure, things like this is not erased or it's not forgotten about. So, the way I've been making sure to continue to um, make sure that doesn't happen is to not be quiet about it, right? And to make sure that I'm being very out loud about it and very clear of where I stand, and not in a way that um, may be making others feel uncomfortable. Not that I necessarily care, but in order, just in a way to make sure that it's not being left out and it's still being heard.
Mhm.
So that's how I've been making sure to celebrate, and then also just making sure that it's in every space that I'm in, which is like me and Fadaka were talking when we first started, that you've been seeing it a lot on, my platform, and that's because I'm not trying to pretend out here, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to. So there's my 3 cents.
Okay, it's worth more than 3 cents.
Okay.
You at least $100. At least $100.
um So, in essence of making sure that things don't get erased, what are some stories that have stuck out to y'all as of current, that you connect to when it comes to celebrating Black history, um, or even historic stories that you're like, I identify with this story, and in this time frame, and where we're at now when celebrating Black history, I want to make sure that I root what I'm doing in this story and or this figure that I identify with.
Mhm. So much, because I feel like I've just been doing so much research. Lately, my attention has really been called to archiving, what it
Mm-hmm.
means to be a memory keeper and to preserve history, right? Particularly in this time where they're like, that didn't happen. It's like, sir, our
Mm-hmm.
grandparents are literally still alive to testify to that.
Mm-hmm.
But what does it mean to keep a record?
Right.
So currently, I'm reading Tony at Random, and oftentimes, we know of Tony in terms of her writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she was also a go getter as an editor and being able to kick down that literary canon and say these voices across the diaspora matter as well. One of her very first books that she edited was an anthology about African literature, right? And
Mm-hmm.
decentering it once again from that white gaze, because there were a lot of white publishers and editors that were like, this voice represents Africa, right? And it's like, man, go do your research. And so really, what does it mean to be a curator in this time, a memory worker, anthropologist? Those are the things that I'm leaning myself into. In doing my research, it's just so many of those stories, because when you think back on the education that I received here, they really gave us the footnotes, right? Or like the more popular stories, right? They didn't teach us about the radical MLK, as Fadaka talked about, but it was just like, he died for us to have freedom. And it's like, he could also live though. Like, we could have had that reality. Let's talk about why that could not be a reality, and how we're still grappling with that. But a memory that sticks out very keenly in my mind, I'm from the Midwest. I'm a Dayton girl. Shout out Gem City, okay, Funktown. But during 5th and 6th grade, I moved with my aunt, and we were in Athens, Georgia. This is the South. And things were different in terms of how they did education. I remember being in the library, the school library, and that's my favorite place in the school, because I could really just, like, it was my little refuge, and like, oh, y'all go over there and do something else, because a lot of them wanted to be on a computer, and it was just something to me about a book, from the way it felt to the way it smelled, and I could just get lost in a book and in their reality. So I'm perusing the aisles, and something just keeps pulling me to go back. And so ultimately I end up in the back of the library, where there's like these books that look like they look very important, because they don't have like a illustration on them. They're like leather bound books, something that you'd almost imagine being in like a law office or some kind of very important place. So I go and I'm just flipping through, and I remember it said like African American history, and then it had the dates like 19 something to this date, 18 something to this date. But inside were all of these visual archives that documented the history of Black Americans, right? So I'm looking at it, and there's this picture of this baby, this Black child, and it is sitting on like maybe a bank, either a swamp or something like that. But it's sitting on a bank that's land. But not too far from it is an alligator, right? And this baby is in hysterics, right? And it's just the baby and this alligator in a picture. It turns out, in doing research, white men who would try to catch alligators, they would go to these disenfranchised Black families and offer them money in order to use their babies as bait, with the reassurance that, oh, we'll pull the baby by the time the alligator gets there, right? And what it brought me into was like, damn, what kind of conditions would a family have to be in for them to even have to consider trusting this white person who clearly does not value Black life? You're using Black babies as bait, right? But in order for my family to get money, or whatever the influence is or the persuasion is, this life is being placed in danger. So I think about stories like that, and then like, what kind of stories do we tell about that time in history that you pushed to the back of the library so we couldn't be able to see? But that also made me consider the ways in which our history is often pushed back. Like, oh, that's not a good part of the history we feel proud of. That's not the America we are selling to everybody. Let's push that to the back. But then you have this 5th grade girl who's curious, who's like, what's back here, right? And so now I see this image, and now that patriotism that you told me to stand with, as you require that I say the Pledge of Allegiance every day, my eyes are now seeing something different. So now you've created this dichotomy for me of, okay, you want me to place my hand across my heart, but then you didn't tell me the story about you putting people who look like me on banks, right? And I think that's a conundrum that a lot of Brown and Black students feel right now, where they are being asked to show patriotism, where they are being asked to place their hand over their heart, to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, to stand for the national anthem. Meanwhile, in the background and in this reality, this is how our people, our culture, our bodies, the extensions of who we are, this is how we're being treated. What I think as an educator in this time that I'm considering is, how do you hold truth alongside history? I think they're the same. Some people think those are two different things, right? But then you also have the mechanisms that are put in place that would have people such as myself, who's an educator or a school leader, or just people who care about other people, have to make quote unquote compromises about the truth. And so I forgot what your original question was, but here's where I'm landing.
No, you got it. You got it.
Yeah, the truth doesn't need a substitute. Either it is or it isn't, right? And I want to
Mm-hmm.
teach the truth. And so right now I am just making sure, like, in my form as an educator, as a freedom dreamer, as a storyteller, what kind of ancestor will I be about the truth? And so I want to tell stories around the truth, and stories that position Black people as human beings and not subjects
Mm-hmm.
to the story of Western civilization.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. Mm. Mm. Mm.
Keep
Mm.
that
Mm. Mm.
down, 'cause,
Mm.
ooh, that was a lot.
Yeah, I'm processing that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so while you were speaking, the first thing that came up for me was thinking about sinners, because
Mm.
the idea about sinners was how um these vampires, which were white people who were trying to get all of the black folks, and who was being seen because of their magic, and then wanting to be a part of it and wanting to go in and wanting to take it away from them. And when you mentioned about the baby and the alligator, and then it being in the water, and we're just gonna wait and see if it actually gets close, essentially like putting your it's like putting your trust in a culture that's really not for you in the first place, right? And you're allowing them to navigate you, but in the end you may get bit or you may end up dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it's interesting because it's like it's the everyday, it's the same story every day, right? Somebody's
Mm-hmm.
trying to take somebody's trying to take something away from us that's ours. When we talk about the things in pop culture, like when Kim Kardashian in the box braids, or white women wanting to get BBLs, or wanting to get bigger lips, or wanting to do different things to their bodies to alter, to because what it boils down to is the wanting to still be and look like us, but not wanting us to live in and walk through the history that we've had to in order to be where we are today.
Yeah.
Random thought. It just that's those are the things that came up to me. Not that they didn't all connect, but
Mm.
Yeah. I think that is a conundrum that Black people face here in America. I'm sure in other parts of the world too. Just speaking from my experience here in America, is on one end, being something and someone that people imitate every day. Okay, like the
Mm-hmm.
imitation never duplicated though, but the imitation is there, and oftentimes it's not flattering. And
Mm-hmm.
so on one end, it's being that, and then on the whole other end, it's being something that is deeply resented. There's this saying in our culture where it says, they want our rhythm but not our blues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's cool to try us on when you want to have a costume, or when it's
Mm-hmm.
something fun to do, or we bring the cool everywhere we go. So if your thing is going to be considered cool, then you have to be in proximity to Blackness,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in many respects. But then not wanting any of what comes along with being in this Black body, right? One of the
Mm-hmm.
things is, let's talk about bonnets, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
The way people talk about Black women wearing bonnets is very anti-Black, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
you'll have a Kim Kardashian wear a bonnet, and
Mm-hmm.
she offers a coin that's to it. And then now all of a sudden they're making money off of things that y'all called us ghetto for, right? Even down
Mm-hmm.
to very long nails, when you saw Joyner wear her long nails when she was making Olympic history,
Mm-hmm.
and women just down the block, around the corner, women that your aunties grew up with, your sisters grew up with, they're wearing these long nails and they're being called ghetto for it. They're being stereotyped for it. And now
Mm-hmm.
look at these billion-dollar corporations making money off of press songs, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
even down to our linguistics, right? Like the ways in which we've given the world language. you'll see certain things that we say, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I see it in schools all the time, the way that Black people speak, whether we bring our African American vernacular, whether you're speaking Geechee language, however it is that we
Mm-hmm.
have preserved our culture through language is often policed and criminalized. But then you'll see a corporation in Sephora using our exact lingo to place on like they lip gloss and then make money off of it. And there's not a Black model anywhere in sight. And so I think it goes back to what James Baldwin says, where he says something to the effect of like, to be conscious in America is to be enraged all the time. And so for me, as a Black woman, I've been thinking about what does it mean for me to reclaim that rage? Because we got plenty to be enraged about, but also in a way where it doesn't consume and eat off of me, because
Mm-hmm.
it can be very parasitic when it doesn't have a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know it's gonna be this deep today, y'all.
Excuse me. Right now, so a bit of background about myself. I'm a first generation Nigerian American, so I am both a Nigerian citizen and an American citizen. And I came here very young. So some people would say that my experience has been flattened because I experienced Nigerian culture through my parents and my parents' generation. But I see myself more as a third culture kid. So that term meaning that I experience a different home culture than the rest of the majority culture that surrounds me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to observe. I always say I feel like I'm sitting in a hallway and like watching people move through the hallway through different parts, right? Whether that's like Black American or white American or whatever it may be, Asian American, I get to watch people from this vantage point in this hallway. And I think one thing I've noticed is that we are not all operating on the same For You page. You know, even earlier I was talking to Dana about how like someone was mentioning to me that it didn't really feel very celebratory for Black History Month because their feed isn't showing that. And I'm like, well, that's not my feed. My feed is full of celebration of Black History Month. And whereas her feed was not. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, right? You're getting a different experience than I am. And so when I think about the fact that we all operating on these different For You pages, right? I realize like we also don't have access to the same histories, right? There's a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like I've met Nigerians who come over here that they just don't know. Excuse me, they just don't know. Like that whole story about the picture of the child in the swamp being used as bait. That's horrifying. I have a 2-year-old. I can't imagine even considering that as a means of income to put my
Mm-hmm.
child in that position. Um, because it's that bad, right? Like, and yet I can tell you that my mom probably doesn't know that story. My grandma probably doesn't know that story. My cousins probably don't know that story. Um, because we're not operating from the same histories. And that's what makes me sad is when there's dissidence amongst the diaspora. It's that people think that other people know. And it's like, no, we don't know, right? Like I was thinking about like some of the stories, the question that you asked about, like, what are some of the stories that have really been hitting you for Black history? There's two people actually. So I think of Alice Price, I believe it was. Oh, sorry, Alice H. Parker. She invented the gas-powered heating furnace in
Mm-hmm.
1919. She is one of the reasons we have to attribute for modern central heating and just HVAC. How many of us
Mm-hmm.
knew that it was a Black woman that like, and we've been going through cold spells, so I know people had their heat on. And we have Miss Alice H. Parker to thank for even having the basis of that system. Like, I'm so proud. I'm like, okay, we've been doing it. We've been doing it here for a minute. But that history is not made mainstream, or even that like there's this, so I grew up listening to Nigerian singers like Fela Kuti. And people know Fela Kuti for he was very much an activist and very much a interesting dynamic man. I wouldn't call him a feminist. Just let me just say that he's a very layered person. Anyway, but recently the Fela Kuti, I guess you could say, of Ghana, They were contemporaries. They actually went to school together. Ebo Taylor just passed away at 90 years old, and he brought in the introduction of what we know as high life today in Ghana, but not just high life, but that affected like things like Afro beats that we listen to, and how much of these people do not get talked about, right? They do not get celebrated or like even understood for the impact that they have. And that's what saddens me, is that like across the diaspora, we think that this exchange of stories and histories are happening, but it's not. It's not that until I'm in conversation with someone where I'm like, oh, I did not know that, or you didn't know that? Like, and I start to realize the gaps that we have that is causing this kind of, I would say like false understanding of what it really is to experience systemic racism in the US, and even in other places, right? Um, so that's what I've been thinking about and processing as you were speaking, Dee.
Yeah, I think I hear all of that, and it lands where what does it mean to be in community with? I don't think it's happening, or at least it's not bubbling up on, like you said, like the mainstream level. But then when I go back and I think about the ways in which movement has happened, it has always relied upon that interdependence across the diaspora, right? Like when we talk about MLK, and he reminds us that a threat to any of us is a
It's a
threat
threat to all of
to,
us, yes.
right? But that is because, stepping out of that silo of like what's happening in Montgomery, Alabama, what's happening in the South, what's happening in America, and thinking, oh no, this is a much larger problem. Like whatever's happening to Black people across the world is happening to us. And then seeing that trickle down in terms of like how our communities have blended together. And that's been a big part because of that cross connection and understanding that what is threatening you is from a system that is also threatening me, is part of a system that's also threatening Indigenous people, is also a system that's threatening our Asian brothers and sisters, right? And so I think about how do we create that in a way that is more sustained and present in today, the ways in which it was back then. Like, for example, hip hop is a global music power, right? And when we think about hip hop, is very young in terms of being a genre, picking up off of where jazz took off. And even jazz was very international because it talked about what was happening to people, oppressed people across the world. But with hip hop, it's interesting. And what I love about this is it is brown and Black kids in New York coming together and putting voice to beat and expression to that, and being very radical and rebellious against the system. And so now when you have like these two groups that, from the outset, you might think like they're not having much communication. They're not really comparing histories, but they're doing something to where it's building up this genre that is now allowing all different kinds of voices to speak back to, the powers that be and back to government. So whether it is, young kids in Haiti, whether it's in the Dominican Republic, whether it's in our different countries in Africa, whether it's here at home, what does it look? I guess what I'm saying is like, in knowing that we're stronger together and united against those forces, what art can we create that is sustainable, that also gets our message out, so that it's on like a world stage, such as a Super Bowl, where we're now seeing Bad Bunny and be able to tell this beautiful, layered, rich, textured history of Puerto Rico and all of the ways in which it connects across the diaspora. Because I'm telling you, as a Black American, when I saw that sugar cane, even though I don't speak the language, the
I already knew what it
ancestors,
was.
hey, yeah, all of those things feel that. And so I felt like, back to what you were saying, Fadaka, about baby, check your algorithm. A lot of us was really trying to be on the anti-Black train, like, yeah, Black people should understand what, and it's like, who is in your algorithm? Because all that's on my algorithm are Black people being like, I'm glad he didn't speak a lick of English, and I'm glad this happened. I'm glad that happened. And you'll have a Chris Brown who say something passive aggressive, and all of a sudden, Black. I'm like, no, that was Chris Brown. That wasn't all of us. Stop doing that, right? But in those moments where we see one of us in the diaspora get a world stage and speak truth to power, how do we then co-create around that in the vein that you were saying, Fadaka, of like, hey, let's talk about the ways in which that history is shared, and then also the ways in which that history is very unique to that particular group of people. Yeah,
that's a really good question. I think so. I think there was a comment about the Benito Bowl that I thought was interesting. They said that people didn't understand it because it was in Spanish, but when Kendrick Lamar did a whole show in English, they still didn't understand. And I was like,
Absolutely.
to me, it's like if you want to understand, you will do the work to understand.
That's
That is
right.
personally what I
I
think.
sure got my lyrics out because I was like,
Yeah,
baby,
same.
I was
Yeah,
having a great
same.
time.
Yeah.
I
but
was
not,
getting.
you know, they also said the Constitution is in English and they don't understand that either.
Ooh,
Well, and then there's that.
there is that. So I just think it's curious. What is really that has been on my mind too in regards to what you were saying is like how do we come together to have this connection, right, and create art
Mhm.
together, but also celebrate the unique histories that we each have, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've realized is just relationship. That's been the biggest
Mhm.
thing for me. Just who am I in relationship with? You know,
Mhm.
who am I in relationship with? And what conversations am I having with them? You know, I'm part
Mhm.
of this book club, and in the book club, it's online. I've been part of it since 2021. Shout out to DSAP. And we are Black women spread across the country. And one of the women who attend the book club is Jamaican. And it influences, and she's a professor, it influences the way that she speaks. It influences the perspective that she sees from. And sometimes I'm in tension with her because there are certain things about Jamaican history I don't know, but there's things that I've learned from her that I admire, like the spirit of resistance that comes from the people of Jamaica. The we not taking that. You can
Mhm.
do that over there, but you can't do that over there. I admire that. I appreciate that. But I also recognize the limited knowledge about the histories of Haiti and Jamaica and the Dominican and Puerto Rico that I do not know of what it meant for them to get to the point that they're at, right? Whether for
Mhm.
good or for bad, for worse, whatever. And that I have some learning to do, but I want to do that learning because I'm in relationship with someone. And so I want to
Mhm.
ask people not just what is on your timeline, but who are you in relationship with?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? Who are you in relationship? I had a friend, she's since passed. I love this woman. She she was hilarious. It feels so weird to talk about her in past tense. But we were watching um we were watching a show together. I think it's called Yellowstone. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it goes
Mhm.
through the history of this family. I think they're living out in like Montana
Mont-
or
it's the the Yellowstone is a huge
like
that spread,
ranch.
yeah, and it
Yeah.
spreads across Utah, Montana, and like um there's one more state that each corner of it hits a different,
Different state.
yeah.
And so what's really
Mhm.
cool is like if you've watched the series and you've watched the prequel to the series, right?
Mhm.
You're watching how they collide with like indigenous people, the Native Americans.
Mhm.
You're watching how they collide with like the structures of the day, whether racial, classism, all of these things. So you're coming into contact with these stories, right, in Yellowstone. And I remember having this conversation one time and we're sitting on the couch and she goes, she's like, "Can you explain to me why Black people are so mad?" And I was like, I mean, this has
Is that enough
happened, this has
time?
happened, this has happened. And she's like, I didn't know any of that. I just
Mhm.
don't know. I didn't know that. She grew up in Alabama. Um, she didn't know what she didn't know. But we were able to have this like really open dialogue because of relationship that had been built. I mean, this is a
Mhm.
neighbor that fed me after work, that, like would went with me to get my hair cut, look for a barber to cut my hair back when I had a low cut and was ready to fight the white barber because he didn't want to cut my hair. Like this was built in relationship, right? Like we were able to have this discussion and not just to be, I wasn't her friend because I was like, I need a token white girl. Like that was not the case. I was genuinely her friend because I enjoyed her company. But through that relationship built, we were able to have this like real dialogue and not this like fighting match that I feel like has become so popular in
Mhm.
on social media, right? Like with the Candace Owenses and the Joe Rogans and all that kind of stuff, where by the time you leave the conversation, you leave angry and not really having heard anything. you know, but when there was a conversation, and this is like one of the principles in my company is like when there's a conversation based on curiosity, trust, and just genuine like care for another person, I'm more willing to listen. Even if we disagree, it takes the pressure off of myself to convert you. I don't need to do any of that. I'm just here to listen and to learn. And and I think that's what's been helping me. It's just relationship with people. We're real people, not influencers, not talking heads, just real people.
Yeah. And so I want to double down on the relationship part, right? And how important that is because that's how we became, yes, friends, but also this conversation has become what it has become was because we were all open to having it. We were all wanting to having it and wanting to see what would come out of that conversation, like what would be the end result that we would get to. Even last year I was getting ready for Pride for last year, and San Diego Pride last year had Kaylani as a headline performer. um One of my coworkers, she identifies as Jewish, and so she had said that Kaylani was anti-Semitic. So first of all, I was like, okay, what does that mean? Like, what did she say that to make you feel this way? So I had to go talk to one of my closest friends who I also work with and just say, can you explain this to me? Because Uncle Dana's a little confused. I can read and see one thing and I can read and see another thing, but what one person's saying is anti-Semitic, and then what the other person's saying, some of it sounds like it's the same thing, but some of it sounds it's contradictory of the other. So help me understand it. And again, it just kind of doubles down on that same thing of relationship and wanting to be curious and wanting to learn. So that way you can start meeting people where they're at when it comes to their views or what the stories that they are connected to when it comes to things like what we're talking about.
Yeah. But I think part of being curious, right? Now, like you pair curiosity with now healthy boundaries, right? And remember,
Right.
boundaries are for ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a point in a conversation where someone might be getting a little agitated or be saying things that are like very insulting. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
sit there and take it because in the name of curiosity. My healthy
Right.
boundary is that I'm not going to sit here and listen to somebody demean another person. So I'm going to remove myself from this conversation or say, let's put a pause on that. Maybe get
Mm-hmm.
something to eat and maybe reconvene when we're a little more settled and less hangry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think what I love about our current generation is like, yes, we therapize everything, but in the therapy, there are nuggets of gold in there of learning to have
Right.
healthy boundaries, learning to stay curious, learning to identify toxic patterns that
Mm-hmm.
are keeping us in relationship with people that are not trying to learn and reciprocate that curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want people to walk away from this conversation having heard that I said, go find a token white friend, token Asian friend, whatever, and just stay in it. That's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think genuine, curious, and healthy relationship requires accountability. Like it needs you to call out crap that needs to be called out. Yes, thank you. It needs to be called out. But and it also requires a level of vulnerability. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to be vulnerable when you don't feel safe. I mean, look at corporations. A lot of us don't feel safe, and we didn't feel safe in our corporations, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have that psychological safety to really say what we really wanted to say without feeling like Jim won't get it because Jim white, but me,
Right.
myself, and I will get it, you know? Like we didn't feel that way. And I think there's something beautiful in relationship when psychological safety exists. And I think
Yes.
right now I love seeing Black and brown people protect their psychological safety. I'm for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think when I love that you ended on the psychological safety part because that's something I've been working on in my therapy. Particularly as like a Black woman in the relationship to rage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely where it's like protect your boundaries, don't stay in a space where things are happening that make you feel psychologically unsafe. And then there's texture to every conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of the things I was thinking about is like when we render ourselves free of history, we then allow for cultural incompetence to just spread, right? Because cultural competence is so tied to understanding history. And so having the history as a Black woman in America where, you know, history of you don't get to talk back, you don't get to disagree or be disagreeable. For women in general, but it's compounded once your identity is that of a woman of color, specifically in my case as a Black woman, right? So I can be very assertive in what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, right? And that will be, she's so angry, I'm not having this conversation with her, she's angry. And it's like, no, I just don't feel like smiling to make your fragility feel less threatened, right? I don't feel like saying it to you in this soft whispery tone. I feel like I should be able to speak this way with my voice being this way, right? Like we wear the mask. But oftentimes what many women of color will tell you is that if we are not smiling and being agreeable, we are immediately called angry, right? And sometimes that anger, I also have a right to that too, which is what I'm working on in therapy, right? I have a right to my anger because my rage, because my rage is radical too. My rage is liberatory as well. Sometimes though, when we think of the diaspora, I think we turn that rage in on each other and it gets directed instead of what it should be directed at, which are the systems, the policies, the practices that have us being divisive with one another rather than being like, hold on, this is actually putting us both or all of us in this predicament. We need to be channeling that energy that way. So that was one. And then also just in the sense of like, as we speak of each other and we speak of each other's experiences, I think one of the questions Fadaka was like, why are they so angry? And then you gave a list, and you the list is so long, America, right? But then also like we want to be careful of not one dimensionally. That's not a word, but putting each other in this one dimension, right? Like Black Americans are not just angry. We also fly. We also have song, we have dance, we have tradition, we have culture, we have language. And so oftentimes it goes back to decensoring that story or decensoring that white gaze, which is Blackness is only this thing or it's only in this story. But it's like, how do we present the diaspora, the culture, the people, the language in abundance of who we are presenting it to be. I hope that landed and made sense. But essentially, like, we get access to our rage, right? Because that is also part of our humanity, our resilience, and our brilliance. And how do we represent one another, especially when speaking in mixed company? How are we representing one another in ways that are full and holistic, and not just like in that realm or through the lens of like a singular?
Yeah, I feel like you also, when you're in spaces with mixed company, the hope is that of having an ally in the room that can help, that can be there to be that ally, to also be your support system in that space when if you're having a conversation in mixed company, that is for sure, we should not be talking about this in mixed company.
I'll give you an example. Like in my work, oftentimes Black parents, particularly if you are a Black mother who's very assertive, majority of our teaching force is white women, right? I've seen Black mothers be called angry. She was just so angry, or she was furious, and I'm just like, what did she say? And then they'll tell me what she said, and I'm like, oh, y'all would have hated my mom because my mom would have said the thing. Like, this is what it is, and this is what it not. They're just very clear. They're direct. They're not asking you for permission. This is what it's going to be for my child. And for someone who lacks the cultural competency, they see it through that lens of, oh my gosh, she's so angry. I now don't feel comfortable speaking to her unless someone else can be in the room. And you still cannot tell me what it is that she said, other than the fact that she was very direct with you, that became a problem for you. So I think in that realm, I then become that ally in the room, right? Where I have a question. I'm curious, what did she say that made you feel unsafe, right? There's usually a stumble and a stutter, right? And then the next thing is to combat that narrative of, oh, she's just so angry. When she came up to the parent night, she was very excited to see. And, because also part of that is combating this image that white supremacy has ingrained into the imagination of what Black people are and how they show up. And I just feel like, one, we deserve a right to our rage, right? And so needed. But then two, that's not the whole person. And so it's also me bringing to light all of the other ways in which this person shows up, because what'll happen is that narrative will then go on into the teacher's lounge, and now we just have this narrative that this Black mother is angry, and
Isn't
it's like,
angry, but
he's an advocate. Those are two different
Yeah,
things.
yeah, an advocate for sure. I mean, it makes me think about code switching a lot, actually.
Mhm.
oof,
And how
I'm
I've
so
had to code
triggered.
switch. I've had to code switch for a white company, white American
Mm-hmm.
company, and also like Black American company too, because to the Black people here, I speak too white, like they would call me
Mm-hmm.
Oreo. And then to the white people, wow, you speak really good for a Nigerian. Like, wow, with a name like Fadaka, you speak so well. Your English is so good. And I'm like, I read a book. It's really not that complicated. Um, and so it, I find myself code switching. Like, again, I think of the hallway. Like, I'm in the hallway, and depending on the room I enter, I find myself code switching to make other people comfortable as much as possible, or to get acceptance, to get trust. Because, like, you know how, like, you vouch for that person at the cookout, like, you bring somebody to the cookout and you're like, nah, this person's cool. I feel like I've
Mm-hmm.
had to earn that on both sides, right? Um,
Mhm.
and sometimes that's made it really hard for me to enter into conversations about the diaspora with Black Americans, because I feel like there's not necessarily someone to vouch for me at the cookout. Like, oh no, she could. You know what I mean? I'm here out here on my own. And then also add the layer of, like, the Nigerian household I grew up, where we are very direct. We say what's on our mind unapologetically. Like, I come from a mother that will just tell you, your breath stink. You should go brush your teeth. She don't care if we in public. She don't care if we inside the house. Mommy will say what mommy wants to say, and you do with that what you want to do with that. And so from both sides, I know that for some people have said I've come out like a know-it-all or abrasive or whatever, and then I struggle with that, right?
Mhm.
Like, how do I just be me?
Mhm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm blessed to be brown and Black. I'm blessed. I love my brown skin. I love that I got to be born as a Black woman in this time. I feel blessed,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes I feel frustrated, and sometimes I feel angry. And sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
feel angry even at the people within our community, because I'm seen as, like, too much of this, too much
Mhm.
centered on whiteness. And then in the white people, I'm seen as a novelty. And I don't want to be a
Mm-hmm.
novelty. I just want
Mhm.
to be
Mm-hmm.
me. So I struggle with that tension.
Mhm.
But back to what you were saying about cultural competency, I think that is where cultural competency is needed on all sides.
Mm-hmm.
I think having conversations. I mean, some of the most craziest stuff people have said to me have come from Black American people. Like, I had a boss, a
The most from Black
the,
people?
some of I had a boss. I was working in college. I was working in facilities, and he was like, you know, I bet in Africa you guys kill food with spears and shit. You guys are just killing your food with your bare hands. And I'm like, no, we go to the store like everybody else. Like, it's right
Mhm.
down the street. Like, so stuff like that I'm like, what did you just say to me? And it's like, in the moment, I'm looking at him, and this is an older gentleman. This is like someone who, okay, this is gonna sound so rude. Older gentleman. I'm 33 now. At the time, he was 40 something. I was maybe like in my 20s, and I'm like, I would expect somebody like you to know better, not just be saying that kind of stuff like that,
Mhm.
right? And it's, again, I didn't have that relationship with him where I was like, haha, kiki, what you mean
Mhm.
by that? It was like, this is a employee boss relationship. And so to hear things like that, and I've heard so many things, like Fadaka sounds like Fadoko, sounds like Chewbacca, sounds like this. Like, I've heard so many crazy things. And so it's hard, because sometimes when I am in mixed company, I just want to be the anarchist in the room and be like, oh, I'm going to mess with everybody in the room because
Mm-hmm.
everybody going to get
Mm-hmm.
it from me. Because I felt hurt from so many different people in the room, right? Um, and that's just me being raw and real. So,
um we've said a lot in this piece, because and so the reason I was saying I feel triggered in this moment is because I firsthand have experienced, being in the room with someone, and immediately it's the way you're talking, I feel uncomfortable. I don't, I'm starting not to want to have this conversation with you anymore. It and the way when we talk about how we show up, I know that immediately the way I show up is me. I'm a black man immediately when I walk into a room. And then it's the nails, and then it's, I'm if I'm done up, I'm done up. If I'm not, then it's, how I'm talking and everything else. But and I know that, when we talk about the rage and uh if I am always positive, then when my scales turn, then it's a whole different thing, and now we're all uncomfortable. But I think what it also boils down to is that how many times are you gonna poke the bear until the bear starts to bite back at your ass, right?
Mhm.
And I think that is where it becomes the labels of, oh, angry black woman, angry black man, you're not, you don't know how to control your emotions in a work environment or in an environment that wasn't necessarily like or supposed to be like that. And it's like, nah, you can't continue to throw stuff and then or to say things and then not get it and not plan to get a response back, because that's
Mhm.
just not how the world works.
Mhm.
Mhm.
um so
I
I
feel like every crash out I had at work was valid.
Oh, absolutely.
When I look back on it, I'm like, yeah, and I was
No.
holding it in for 6 months. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah.
um
Never mind, let me stop.
I want to take a small break, and then when we get back, we'll continue the conversation.
Cool, cool.
And we are back. So we have, I mean, what does Drake say? How long is he going to talk on this intro? We did the longest intro ever, but it's fine. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, and I love that. And I love that we have dived deep in this conversation. So I want to kind of switch gears because we have been talking about the diaspora, and we've talked about Black Americans and then African diasporas. And I kind of want to dig a little deeper into that. So my question for the group is, how do you see the relationship between Black American identity and the wider African diasporas showing up today in culture, conversation, or even some of the misunderstandings that may come? And I know we've talked a lot about relationships and depending on the relationships, and then how we can kind of bring it together, but wanted to kind of hear y'all's thoughts on that.
I mean, the more I talk to people, the more I realize like even what Dee was saying about her mom being an advocate at school, that's totally my mom. My mom would be direct. My mom would be like, you're not doing that to my child at the school. She doesn't care if you think she's an angry black woman. She will be heard. Um, and she will see the change that she is requesting. And I see that like through line across the
Mm-hmm.
diaspora. I think we can all say that many of us come from strong black moms, you know, who protected us, who taught us, who did so many things, and I'm both like proud to come from that, but it also saddens me to see how strong Black moms across the diaspora have just had to be,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what kind of systemic thing that they're fighting, right? Whether that's like governmental corruption in Nigeria or like systems that are not the greatest or even interpersonal relationships, right? I don't know if y'all heard about Yoruba demons and Igbo demons because Nigerian men are fine, but sometimes they also will also break your heart. Like, like, like those types exist. And so, and I see those through lines where I'm like, wow, like, why is it that Black women, we get the short end of the stick sometimes in relationships with these Black men? What's going on? So I see some of that. I see it in our art. Um, I think it was so funny because somebody was like, this was a long time ago. Someone was like, in a Nigerian music video, they're like, don't let Beyonce see it because she's gonna put it in her next music video. And But I just see it in the way we sing and the way we celebrate. I mean, I love Black folks at graduation because once that kid
Mm.
crossed the street, you hear them all like, ah! Like that. Even when they tell them be quiet, hold your applause. No, we don't care. We gonna
Mm-mm.
scream. We gonna celebrate. I see it in those things so many times.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to like the Bonito Bowl, right? Where it was like you saw the diaspora be able to connect in some way to it, and stand on it like 10 toes down with each other, right? In terms of, it may have been sugarcane for this particular part of the diaspora, and over in this part of the diaspora it was cotton, and over in this part of the diaspora it was rice, and over in this part, but even around such devastating conditions, you see culture, you see music, you see movement, you see healing, you see resilience, and all of these things that, yes, make us strong, but also all of these things that make us very tender and very human with one another. And so that's why I feel like that's how, Latino kids in the Bronx and African American kids could come together and create a genre. It's like that fusion. And that's what I think of with the diaspora. It's this fusion of food. How you do
Mm-hmm.
your fish might be different. How we do our fish in Jamaica might be different than how you do your fish in Chicago, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
attached to story, culture, and identity. How you do Afro beats here may be different than how we do a trap beat here. But if we fused it together, again, it's creating like that shared audacity to say I'm human, that shared audacity to claim ownership of ourselves, our community, our sound, particularly in the face of that which has come to suppress, oppress, and erase. And so for me, I've just been very proud of the diaspora for continuing to put on. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I have seen us make legislature crumble under
Mm-hmm.
that kind of weight. I always say this, and I'm working on this in my curriculum. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement and Malcolm X and all of those figures that are both lionized and that are behind the scenes, being able to come together and create a movement and constantly tying it to what is happening to these people in this part of the diaspora has really like laid this groundwork for us to think about, even in this moment, how are we about to connect across the diaspora? Because it's happening to all of us. What happened and is happening to Gaza and Palestinians?
Mm-hmm.
It's very connected to what's going on in Chicago. It's very connected to
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in the Sudan. It's very connected to what's going on in Puerto Rico. And that's
Mm-hmm.
in terms of our climate. It's in terms of our corrupt government. It's in terms of all of these things, our bodily autonomy. I mean, even down to
Mm-hmm.
that. Why am I still arguing about something that Toni Morrison wrote about in Beloved, which happened in the 18? Okay. I'm just saying, I feel like also at a point, I just feel like the diaspora has so much power. And I'm thinking of in what ways do we set the next generation up to take the baton, and continue having a shared value system, different histories, but I think there should be a shared value system. And I think there is a shared value system.
Mhm.
We care about what's happening to our communities, particularly in terms of politics and,
Mm-hmm.
economy, climate, all of those things. So I think it's back to like what Fadaka said, which is like, who are we building relationships with? And also, I
Mm-hmm.
think we start auditing relationships, because you'll have
Oh.
some people in the diaspora that, well, it's not happening to me. That's them over there. Not baby. That's just who they own right now. Okay. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
gonna get turned. And so what does it look like to even audit and hold each other in loving accountability, calling each other in for correction? So when people
Mm-hmm.
were speaking out, I mean, they weren't in my algorithm, but I believe y'all when y'all say some people were hating on the Benito Bowl. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to do some education on, hey, when we don't stand united behind anybody in the diaspora that is, because we ain't just rooting for everybody black, okay? All
Mm-hmm.
skin folk ain't kinfolk. But we need to have more concerted efforts of standing behind one another, in those spaces, because I think where we collaborate and co-create is where our power lies. When we're divided, that's when they're able to keep us apart. And that's how people
Mm-hmm.
don't know about your history, because if you paint someone to be valueless to the imagination, then no one will care to learn about that group of people.
Absolutely. I agree. Anything
Mhm.
to add, Fadaka?
No, I think Dee said it so eloquently. Yeah, she said it really eloquently. I think the co-creation, the collaboration is happening.
Mm.
I think of brands like Topicals,
Mhm.
and I think of them because so Topicals is this skincare brand, and what I love about them is it is one of the things I love about them. It is founded by a Black woman, and they've been so intentional about celebrating the diaspora, but also celebrating just people of color, women of color. And so
Mhm.
they did a whole ad campaign around like centering like some of the people of like like brown bodies, like especially from Asia and like the Middle East. And it was their quiet, it was like they were saying the quiet part out loud through the visuals, like we stand with Gaza, regardless of how y'all feel about it. And what
Mhm.
I love was I love seeing like this Black woman reaching her hand to be like, I see you, my like Asian, my Middle Eastern sister, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it was such a powerful ad. And I don't got Topicals money just yet, but I was, ooh, okay, like
Yeah.
let me, like, but it's just like moments like that that I see that are happening, right? That I keep tabs on because I'm like, oh yeah, I see you. I see what you're doing out there. Um, and I like in macro and micro ways. I mean, even like
Mm-hmm.
remember the fund, the like the entrepreneurs, the like venture fund or something that was taken to court because they said they were excluding white women. And I'm like, bruh, what are you mad about? You have access to all this other venture capitalism funding. We are asking for one,
Mhm.
and you're
Mm-hmm.
mad.
Yeah.
What does that say about you?
Yeah. There was research that showed that the top benefactors of DEI were white women who voted against their interests, by the way. But
How many times do we have to keep coming back to this conclusion? I work. Oh, let me not say too much about work, but I am having this same note that you're saying continues to replay in my mind more time often than not in the workplace
mhm.
because of our setup right now at work.
Mhm.
And it's beyond me.
Mhm.
And it's beyond me and it can be frustrating to know how willfully ignorant people can be, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace and who benefited the most from it. It
Mhm.
annoys the fuck out of me. Like
Mhm.
just and just mind blown.
Mhm.
um so I do want to give a moment to talk about freedom practice, and I want to talk about the framework that you use, Dee, and kind of we can go around and just kind of talk about which one we identify with the most. I think it's great.
Yeah.
So I'll let you kind of talk about it, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so freedom practice is my baby. It is my framework that I put together that's really rooted in this audacity of belief that we can embody the freedom that it is that we are working towards. So it's really decentering freedom and liberation as something that is an end goal at the end of the road, child, and into like
Mhm.
something we can have today and make a daily practice. And so moving it from theory and philosophy to embodied lived practice. And so they are a set of invitations for people depending on where you are in your journey. The first invitation is being able to really ground yourself in the sacred practice of naming who you are, naming your story, your desires, your wants, doing it unapologetically, or if your voice shakes, okay, because we do get socialized in these systems into what can
Mhm.
be possible. So naming is really bringing in the possibility, our naming is really grounding yourself in the possibility of what can be and who you can be within that. So I love to say, like, I'm going to write the life that I want. I'm going to create the life
Mhm.
I want. And so I name very boldly what it is that I want and work towards that. Now, that's not to say that these systems are not systeming. I do not sit here and try to convince people that you can heal outside of these systems because the systems are
Yep.
here and we were born into them, right? But what I am saying is we can interrupt those systems, and we have this
Mm-hmm.
long diasporic history of disrupting systems that were not conducive to our human thriving. And so those are both the external systems, right? The policies, the legislation, all of that, but it's also those internal systems, that inner voice that keeps us from becoming. And then we move
Mm-hmm.
into inflammation, because interruption takes a lot of energy, right? And that's part of our journey, but also too is the sweet surrender of reclamation, which is us returning to those sacred practices that have always been ours, returning to that history that, systems have tried to erase, returning to practices that hold us in loving accountability and community. And then finally, that invitation of legacy. And when we hear
Mm-hmm.
legacy, I think, at least in my mind, the very first thing is like, who died, right? Like someone has to
Mm-hmm.
die in order for legacy to happen. And that's also within this freedom practice pillar, is legacy as something that is yours to enjoy now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not trying to build something and then I'm dead and gone and I don't get to enjoy it too. I want to be able to enjoy something that I pass on and pass down and get to hold it now. So I work with freedom dreamers within that framework to create these healing centered experiences and healing centered environments that allow them to show up in their full capacity, as someone who takes full ownership of themselves. So from that, I do fellowships, I do classes, I do freedom dream labs, I do coaching, and it's really in this vein and in this seed of being as free as you can be and creating the kind of world that embraces that free self.
Amazing.
Oh, I do.
Amazing, amazing,
Okay, cool.
amazing. Um, so and then in talking about, the freedom practice, and then moving to the other side where Fadaka, you create spaces for folks, talk a little bit about the work that you do as well.
So I create events that are culturally informed, and I also do cultural competency coaching. And what I love about it is that I really try to help people understand that cultural competency is a muscle. And with anything, you got to exercise that muscle. So there will be days where you don't want to do it. There will be days where you did it and you didn't do it properly. There will be days where you did it and you did it great. But like any muscle, it needs to be exercised and it needs to be done again and again and again to get stronger, so that it becomes a habit and it's built in. And so one of the things I love about it is just helping people get curious again, get curious about themselves and why they think what they think, get curious about each other, get curious about systems. Why is this set up like this? Why do we always do this event this way? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I really enjoy doing that for people. It's so much fun, but it's also such intentional growth work. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it challenges me all the time. Like, oh, why do I like eating certain foods at certain times? Like, I love eating dinner for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
But I
Mm-hmm.
grew up a savory girl. In Nigerian cooking, there's not a lot of sweet food. So I grew up
Mm-hmm.
eating very savory dishes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like pancakes are too sweet for me. So I want some rice, I want some meat, I want chicken in the morning, I want a lot of sauce on it. Like I want something
Mm-hmm.
savory. And I had to take a moment to be like, oh, that's okay. Like that is
mm,
okay. And I love that about me. I love that about where I come from, you
mhm.
know? So yes, that is what we do over here at FDK Co.
Got it.
Amazing. And I feel like, so, creating a space where you can practice freedom in the four quadrants, and then also creating a space where you get people to kind of think a little bit deeper into how they're connecting with one another, essentially,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Both of these different areas and spaces create an opportunity for folks to do what? Build a relationship. And that
Hey, nice
is
way to title that.
and that is really what today's conversation has been all about, is building relationships, being able to have the conversation, being able to address the things that have to be addressed in order just to build understanding.
Mhm,
A lot of what I've been doing or the last couple of months, the last 2 months of the year, has been
mhm,
trying to build understanding within, you know, through MLK. We did a virtual MLK tour with my organization. That's really dope. Actually, is a Black woman-owned business in Atlanta. She does a virtual tour with a facilitator that's on the grounds going to all the monumental locations in Atlanta, Georgia. And then she's presenting like history and fun facts and things like that on one end, and then they're doing it on the other end. So it's really
Mhm.
dope. But
Really cool.
this year, I'm really focused on being intentional about messaging and being intentional about how I unapologetically saying the things that need to be said, because I'm very much that I'm in that interruption phase, and then I'm in that reclaiming it phase as well, because I'm like, let's burn this motherfucker down and let's
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes.
um
I love that, Dana, that you're in that space of interruption, because while it does take energy, I feel like look at what has been birthed because people
Mhm.
had the audacity to interrupt and say, "Yeah, actually, that's not going to work for me and mine," and those
Mhm.
over across the. I think for me, where I am in freedom practice, or where it's most present for me, is reclamation. Um,
Mm.
Reclaiming my time. No, I cannot come to work today. Okay, y'all off
Mhm.
my phone
Mhm.
too. But it's also been like reclaiming what grieving looks like for me, and the history of Black grief in this country and its ties to labor, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, you just had a baby that we're most likely going to sell off, and I'm gonna need you back in the field, right? Like, you're not even
Mhm.
healed yet, and we're not that far removed in terms of our labor force, in terms of how much time women are given off, but also the way death is handled. So y'all know my dad passed away in January.
Mhm.
And I get very triggered by workplace policies around grief because they genuinely
Mhm.
feel like 3 days is enough time for you to grieve a mother, a father. But also a lot of the grieving policies are very anti-Black because we
Mhm.
often have had to rely on fictive kinship, right? And so no, this person is not my blood, but if Miss Mary next door watched me while my mom worked my whole childhood, like that's family, right? And
Mhm.
so for me, it's been this reclamation space of what does it look like to reclaim practices in my culture that actually affirm and honor my whole identity and experience rather than, well, this is the policy here at this workplace, which is borrowed from the plantation, right? So
Mhm.
I've been in my reclamation space. What about you, Fadaka?
I am sitting here in interruption
Mm,
and legacy. I have a 2-year-old daughter. She's biracial, and I keep asking myself, like, what kind of world do I want her to walk into?
Mhm.
Um, how do I want to equip her? How do I want her? What are the problems I want her to be facing when I'm dead and gone?
mm,
And it's not this. I'm tired of this.
Mhm.
And so I'm thinking about legacy, right? I'm
mm,
thinking about how can organizations and corporations change to be so, to not be so dependent on the money first, but understanding that, like, without the people, you're not even gonna get the money, right? On
mm,
both
Mhm.
sides, the customers or the employees. Like, how do we change those dynamics? What does that look like? Um, and then interruption in just under like in how people in just conversations with people. Like, why do you think that way?
mhm,
Let's
Mhm.
unpack that. Like, why? Like, have you ever sat to ask yourself why? And I
Mhm.
find that most people haven't.
yeah,
Um, I grew up with a mom who was not afraid of me questioning um scripture, like
mhm,
questioning like the Bible. And she was always like, ask the questions no one wants to ask at church. Go ahead and ask it because God ain't
mhm,
afraid of your questions. So go ahead and ask him. And so I definitely carry that like
mhm,
curiosity and that behavior of questioning throughout the rest of what I do. And so I find interruption to be very good. If you haven't had a crisis of faith, then are you really doing it? That's what I want to
mhm,
know.
Mhm.
mm. Okay. That touched something in me
That
for
was
that.
free. That was free.
Thank you. I'm gonna go talk about it after this. No, that's real. That's real. Um, yeah, and I think too, like just claim. I think that's the beautiful part of Black history is that we're doing all of it in Black history, right?
Mhm.
Now that I think of it, I'm glad you brought this up, Dana. Where it's like Black history started as a week, and that was just us being like, first of all, what you
Mhm.
not gonna do after we not built this up is act like we didn't exist, right? And so like that was us naming boldly who we are, taking ownership of our story. But then I'm also thinking about the interruption. Like Black history is so much about how we have been disruptors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Always had an agenda that the top line item was freedom, and we gonna get there whether you resist us or not, but we coming. And then I'm thinking about reclamation, how we have had to say, like, actually, rock and roll, that's us, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Country, move, we got it from here. Now you can come and participate, but we're not going to act like we're not allowed to be here, right?
That's right.
So I think Black history just enveloped so much, Black History Month enveloped so much of freedom practice, even down to the legacy, where it's just
Mm-hmm.
like not only the legacy of those who have come before us, but like Fadaka said, like what legacy are we about to pass on? Because we're not going to be here forever. My mom used to say, "You're going to miss me when I'm gone." Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
times where I'm like, oh, I'm so glad my mom does not have to see this clown in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are
Mm-hmm.
other moments where I'm just like, damn, I could really use my mama's hug right now because what is happening? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I appreciate Black history being an energizer and a vehicle for us to be reminded of who we are and what's possible, because to tear down segregation, well, you know, they still keeping us segregated, but at least legislatively to have people be like, no, write that in a record and do it in a way that would give us protections and citizenship. That kind of feat empowers and inspires me every day. And I know it came at a bloody cost for sure.
So I think to wrap it all up, thinking about legacy and because we've all mentioned our parents and our mothers and fathers, I want to ask, when you think about your legacy, what will you do to continue to make legacy real now moving forward for you? And this could be a layered question and could happen at multiple different times in your life, but immediate thoughts, what are your thoughts?
I have mine, but I know I just finished up talking. So I'm
No,
away.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead, D. What is yours?
You know, I feel like that's going to be an ever evolving question. But
Mm-hmm.
where I am in my sojourn now, legacy looks like owning my rhythm. That is something
Mm-hmm.
that's so important to me in this time. Um, and it's a years long process because I started noticing that I was moving at a plantation rhythm when I would like just be in a rush, like even down to going to the store or things that I didn't need to be in a rush about. Like, baby, why are we walking fast to the printer? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So really divesting from this false sense of urgency, which is so tied to like capitalism and labor, and then the history that shows up in that as it relates to me being in a Black body, where it's like you have to be on, producing. For me now, legacy looks like I want to be able to, when the future generations look back on my life, I'd like them to say that was a woman who took her time.
Mm-hmm.
And that even goes for relationships. Don't rush me into a relationship because I listen, I'm a let's press pause, right? But it's like really that's for me, having ownership of myself is being able to move at my own rhythm. And that has brought into crisis, what does that mean in terms of a career where you have to be somewhere at such and such time? And for this, I want flexibility. I want a legacy of flexibility, a legacy of flow, a
Mm-hmm.
legacy of my own liberated rhythm. And I'm audacious enough to think that I can have that because
Mm-hmm.
listen, it's just gonna have to happen because
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
9 to 5 is strangling the life out of your good sis. And so for me, that's what I want my legacy to be, for people to look at me and say, I can create a life that is actually aligned with my free spirit and really feel like they can go forward and do it. Now that means I got to look at other people who have that kind of legacy so that I can stay inspired because I do need health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why they're not giving it to us because they know a lot of us will quit if we have
Um,
some of it.
Child, especially some affordable health insurance. I'd have left
Yes,
last
seriously,
Tuesday.
quality, affordable health insurance.
Yes.
Because it can be affordable and trash. Let's be for real.
Woo!
Uh,
Yes, it will.
Sorry, that's my health admin sign coming out. For me, legacy looks like being present to
Mm.
myself. Um, you know, becoming a mom 2 years ago was such a shift for me. And it's so easy to put yourself at the bottom of the list in like your household because you're like, I gotta make sure the kid is good. I gotta make sure the hubby's good. I gotta make sure everybody else is good and forget about like myself. And being present to myself has been something really important to me. Whether that looks like waking up at like 2 a.m. to just sit in the bathroom quietly and just hear myself think. I even went to a sound bath. I had never gone to a sound bath before, but I went to a sound bath and it was glorious. It was glorious. If you haven't heard of a sound bath, look it up. It was glorious. I went to a sound bath. It was wonderful. And just that, because I don't want my child or my children or even my husband to go like, that's not a lady that took care of herself. You look tired. You know, I want to sit with myself again and enjoy sitting with myself and being present to myself. I think one of the things is that like Jesus has been like, oh, I enjoy sitting with you, but you don't enjoy sitting with yourself. I'm like, dang, like, dang.
They be putting a little on the nose sometimes, yeah.
So it's just like those moments where I'm like, okay, like, yes, being present to myself is the legacy right now that I'm trying to lean into.
I love that. The part that you said where you said sitting with myself again just felt so poetic. I feel like that's a poem or a song. Like the again part.
You gonna write it, D?
I might a little
right. I'll look forward to that poem.
Real quick, one thing you said made me think of a joke. So I was watching some younger kids after school, and they're in like preschool, so like 3, 4, 5. And so I was coloring, and this little boy wanted me to do Legos with him. And I was like, well, let me finish up this part right here. And he was like, why are you coloring? And I said, well, coloring really helps me de-stress. Like, have you ever had a really stressful day and you just needed something? Baby boy looked me dead in my eye. He said, I'm 4.5. So I was like, I remember
he said, do not put your stuff on me, ma'am.
He's like, I'm 4.5. I'm living the best.
Like, I am 4. I'm not stressed.
Yes.
About what? These Teddy Grahams in the cabinet? I'm trying to get some more of those.
Fadaka was saying like she wanted to be like, that's a woman who took care of herself. That's what I was hoping to give. I was like, have you, when I'm stressed, I do this. And he's like, ma'am, I'm 4. I do not know that life.
Bills are paid. Food is in the fridge.
So for me, mine is about vulnerability and vulnerability, and then also living in the moments more and giving myself the okay to want to do so many different things, but also within reason, because you put too much on
you.
Putting too much on your plate it can be overwhelming, and then you don't give yourself enough time to do other things. So so that's kind of where I'm at, and I do agree that it's a continuous thing. It kind of brings me to my last week. I talked about becoming, because I watched the Becoming documentary, and just the different.
Did you watch Melania?
Huh?
I said, did you watch Melania?
No.
Oh, okay. I was just okay.
I don't even know where you can watch that. I feel like that's kind of cool. That's okay. I'm not trying to be rude. I was really not trying to be disrespectful. It was honest. Like, I don't even know where you could watch it. So
they said that Michelle Obama's what was the percentage? Like 300% increase. Like she was leading.
Yes. Yeah.
And they had it on like the kids' Netflix as well. Like the kids were also kind
of. But yeah, I was just thinking about the different ways in the process of becoming that she talked about, and what it meant to her, etc. And I think that's the same thing when you talk about legacy. It's gonna change as you accomplish things and as you get through to the other side of specific things.
Dana, when you said that, it made me think Michelle Obama's Becoming was the first audiobook that had me in my car crying, especially that part where her dad passed away. I had to pull over, like, what? So that's why
the reason I even the reason I even talked about it last week was because the first 15 minutes, girl, I was in here sobbing. I was like, oh my God. It was just yes, we live through that moment, but it's hard to relive it again and then really realize an end of an era. And I was like, "Ooh, girl, why did I turn this shit on?"
And that's why I
Sound like
haven't
your soul
watched
needed it.
because I'm like, Lord, I just need to get my tissue ready. But even
Yes.
that is so when you think about that arc, when President Obama was doing his first run and he was like going around to the different stops, he stopped in Dayton. And I remember in our high school, we went to see him.
Mm-hmm.
And he took some of our hands and everything. And that was my first time engaged with the Secret Service. Okay. They were really out there.
Mm-hmm.
But to see that and then them be inaugurated and then a second term and then them leave the White House with this force coming in and then what it's
Mm-hmm.
been since then, it's just like, wow, in our lifetime. Toni Morrison says, like, people says they don't ask to be born, but I think we did. And I'm like, damn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm over there like, God, listen, when that family's in the White, let me make sure I'm born at this time, or perhaps God
Mm-hmm.
knew like I'm gonna need you to be present at this time. So it goes
Mm-hmm.
back to what I was saying, like what it means for us to be present with ourselves and with each other in this time. And I think Black History Month lets us do that more. Like we
Mm-hmm.
always say, like, my algorithm lit, right? And then for
Mm-hmm.
those who are not feeling so at home, is like, how are we? I don't know. I just feel like Black history is for the diaspora to be able to engage across culture and values that I appreciate. So now I'm gonna go watch that. Thanks.
Yes, yes. Well, thank y'all so much for coming back to have this conversation with me. Tell the people where they can find and follow you, and it'll also be in the description box. Whoever
Yeah,
wants to
so
start
you can
first.
find me on Instagram at Fadaka George and also on Threads at FDK Co dot the table because everybody's welcome to the table, but
Mm-hmm.
you might be on a different side, so I'm gonna have a conversation. Um, so yes, you can find me in those places.
I love it. You can find me with the Freedom Dreamers, okay, and the Resistors. But on social media, you can find me on Instagram, freedom.practice.coach, and then on threads, Diana.Sudie. I tend to give a lot of my revolution she wrote tidbits over there. Yeah, that's where I put all my spicy stuff.
Amazing. And you can find the Hella Chisme Podcast on all the platforms, Instagram, Threads. We may be moving off TikTok, but we ain't talked about that yet. YouTube, at Hella Chisme Pod. I think we've dropped enough gems today. I think we've left the people enough to talk about and enough to ponder on. So I think we can go ahead and end the show here. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you back next time. Bye.